here with Eric Smith. He's from Vancha in Vancouver. I've actually known Eric for quite a few years now. He's 5-6 years when we met. He's in my head very much a scholar when it comes to his Pu-Erh and his different tea selections. We're really happy that he's at this event. And today he's going to be doing a talk on the politics of Pu-Erh storage. So I'll leave it to Eric.
Thank you. Yeah, the topic we came up with last year, but I wasn't able to make it at the last minute, so we saved it.
Yes.
I'd like to say that the content has improved from last year to this, but I think that would be a complete lie. But as with the aging of tea, with each passing of a year, I think it's probably the same with you, Jared, that our knowledge of our own teas, of different types of tea varietals, of technique really improves and takes it on a different shape, we hope. I do have a tea. I wasn't originally planning on making tea. Our focus at Vancha, which I have to plug, a tea shop in downtown Vancouver, on Hornby and Hastings, just up from Canada Place, if you get the chance to get over there. Also opening one in Ambleside, West Vancouver. Worth the trip over. Our main focus, when we first opened, the shop was called Silver Crescent, and our focus was primarily on aged Pu-Erh. And the focus has shifted slightly, I think, in response to the market. But partly because Pu-Erh is still something I think that not everyone fully understands. And I would include myself in that, and I think most collectors of Pu-Erh would include themselves, and even the top collectors, that it's something that you can study forever and never really completely know. I've had the chance to work with a few of the top collections for Pu-Erh in the world. First in Taiwan with He Zhaibing, and later in Hong Kong with Bai Shixing, who's known as the Emperor of Tea. I'll just share some of the stories of interacting with their collections. So, for example, I keep my Pu-Erh in a closet at home in cardboard boxes, and a cardboard box is actually an excellent way to store your tea. But as contrast, like Master He in Taiwan, for example, he would have warehouses, and when he was constructing a new center, we had the chance to drink tea in his warehouse, surrounded by the tea, and that really gives you a sense of the activity of Pu-Erh. Also, in climates like Taiwan and Hong Kong, the climate is probably more suited to aging Pu-Erh in the traditional way than say Vancouver. Vancouver is known among Chinese collectors as being very good and Victoria I think would be the same, very good for aging tea. However, it happens much more slowly. So the main things that Pu-Erh needs for developing is humidity and temperature. Kira, who isn't able to be here today, she's I think 8 months pregnant. She's more of the scientist in our shop, but she and I work closely with a man who produces tea. He's a microbiologist by background, and worked for the major tea factories in Yunnan before sort of retiring and taking up yoga as his main discipline. And he also makes boutique teas, but he shared with us some information which he believes are the ideal conditions for aging your tea, and I thought I'd share them with you. So he says that the tea should be a minimum of 25 centimeters off the ground, and a minimum of 41 centimeters from a window. Light is not necessarily a problem, although direct sunlight is considered to be less than ideal. If your house is heated to like 40 degrees year round, Celsius, that would be fantastic. But and he says 50% humidity, and he's living in Yunnan, so that's a little bit different, like from Hong Kong or Taiwan, which are in the topic of the politics of storage. There's some debate within Chinese tea collectors as to where the best storage is. And there's I think a lot of misconception about what is the best storage. Some people say dry storage, but we don't really know. But what does dry storage exactly mean? For some people, dry storage means no humidity, no heat. You want to essentially lock the tea in a time machine. There was a fellow, major Taiwanese collector called Deng Shihai, who produced a book in the 90s sometime, and he was talking about his collection. And we're talking about teas that are in upwards of 100 years old. You know, in the old days, people wouldn't dream of starting to drink Pu-Erh until it was at least 25 or 30 years old. We have a friend, Michael, who's on Instagram. You should follow him. He works with a collector in Seattle, and his teacher wouldn't drink any tea younger than 30 years old. Or the wife of the teacher Y in Hong Kong, she wouldn't drink anything less than 50 years old. Now that's not a privilege that many people have in this day and age. I'm happy these days I'm happy if I find something from the 90s, and I'll get a little bit excited, but it's a little bit different from the old days. But so Deng Shihai put out this book where he said that in Pu-Erh, dry storage of tea is preferable. Now his concept of dry storage is not, I would argue, exactly what they're saying in China, where you're storing teas in the north and there's very low humidity, and so the teas are maturing at a very slow rate. People that I've worked with in the past, you would have teas from the middle 1980s, which is a 35-year tea, but it drank more like what I would expect from a 10-year tea, because they're really clamping down on the humidity and the temperature, which is like somewhere like Shenyang or Beijing. That's going to be more like Vancouver, maybe a little bit hotter, a little bit faster storage. But what he meant was, if you're comparing it to, like in Hong Kong in the old days, they would often take Pu-Erh and stick it in caves, like damp caves under the city, and they would be, you'd get mold growing on the teas and all this stuff. That's what's meant by really wet storage. Dry storage doesn't necessarily mean hermetically sealed and not meant to age. It just means aging within reason. So you still get those beautiful sort of earthy and complex flavors, and even some of the like the like, I don't want to say mold, but bacterial cultures going there, and those are a good thing. Those are part of what makes Pu-Erh really a beautiful taste experience, beautiful sense experience, and imparts a lot of the classic qualities that we look for. I remember that you have or still have some extraordinarily old Pu-Erh in this shop, which is very difficult to find nowadays. So if you're lucky to have a chance to drink something from that old style, I highly recommend you get that as a baseline of, this is how tea was up until sort of the Chinese economic miracle of the early 2000s. And it's not to say that one perspective is any better than the other. Some people, a fellow was in the shop the other day and said, I like nothing better than to have the freshest spring harvest Bingdao right from the trees, and that's what he prefers, and that's one type of tea. That type of tea will give you much more of a buzz. It's a lot more. I don't want to say green tea like, but it's a very different experience than drinking, say, a 40-year-old naturally aged raw tea, where you're sort of sinking into the experience. I suppose it would be the difference between sort of like, I don't know, moonshine and old whiskey or something. Not everybody likes old peaty whiskey, but if you do, then it's you do. Another thing to bear in mind, as though I at least acknowledge the topic of the tea, is that the politics of storage, much like kung fu or art or cinema in China, no one agrees about anything. So the people in the north don't disagree with the people in the south. The people in the south think the people in the north are barbarians. And so to say there's any one answer in any of these things which is correct would be very difficult. And depending on, like, if you're talking to a Chinese, Hong Kong collector, they'll have a very different perspective. And they'll say, yeah, well, mainland China, they tell us our tea's bad, but we're happy to carry on drinking it. And that's Daniel, a friend of ours in Chinatown, is like that. He's like, well, if other people don't think it's bad and don't want to drink it, then it keeps the price low for us, which is something to keep in mind. But the most important thing I would say is to trust your own experience of the tea as opposed to what necessarily is written in an article or what. But often people in tea shops have an agenda. Like I think most of us in the West Coast are pretty cool, but some people have a pretty strong agenda to sort of tell you that the type of tea that they sell is the best type of tea in the world. For ourselves, we focus on Chinese tea just purely. It's partly because the shop is 500 square feet, and we might like to have matcha, but we certainly acknowledge, like, I like matcha personally, but we don't sell it. But I don't take a lot of time saying that, oh,
Yeah.
but there's like in any industry, there's a lot of funny stuff going on in the tea world. And if you ever want to have your eyes really open to the vast adventure land that is tea and the backbiting, the politics, the fun, the subterfuge, the espionage, go to China, go to Kunming, and your eyes will be open. If anyone has any questions, I'm hoping that made sense. My brain sort of thawed out midway through. Yeah.
So I have.
We'll save the tea making until.
I have Pu-Erh,
Yeah.
but it's in these cookies to dry environment.
Yeah.
It's wrapped in paper. So what do they say about sealed or kept wrapped or?
Oh, the other recommendations, which I didn't quite finish from Mr. I in Yunnan, is so there was 25 centimeters above the floor, 41 centimeters from a window, no direct sunlight. He prefers pine-made shelves, which is good because pine is cheap here. Very expensive in China, very cheap here. But it should have airflow. So, whether that's in the room, but also Pu-Erh needs air in order to do the what is it? In order to ferment the age. There's aerobic in the tea cakes. It's aerobic and anaerobic
But keep it
fermentation.
wrapped.
That's the science
sealed?
as I get, unfortunately.
Wrapped up and sealed?
Yeah.
Or open to the air?
So the air partially acts as a filter, but cardboard, like I mentioned, a cardboard box. A cardboard box is also an excellent way of filtering any sort of smells or odors. A kitchen is sort of frowned upon for aging tea. So if you have it in a closet in a cardboard box. And one more thing is, all tea collectors, like from the big ones, will always separate their teas at least between raw Pu-Erh and ripe Pu-Erh. That's very important. And then if you have a range of ages in your tea, you're also going to want to, like Mr. Bai's, one of his warehouses, the good one where he had his office, was about a city block long and 7 stories high. And you'd walk in there, it's just this massive maze. And one floor would be, okay, this is like the mid-1970s floor for raw. But if you, because there's these cultures going on, there's this each, I know the guys from Montreal with Camellia sinensis talk about this, different people aging different teas in Montreal, which traditionally you wouldn't think is a great climate for aging tea, but they're getting very, very different results depending on whose house it is. So by keeping your teas together, the teas will influence each other. So ripe tea, so the basic thing is ripe tea, raw tea, separate. And if you have like a 1950s or 1970s tea, I would separate that from a modern tea. Keep them in 10-year ranges. So if that's in a box. So for yours, I can't predict what the result's going to be, but keep it in the wrapper. Don't use Ziploc bags. Ziploc bags, I've seen beautiful teas destroyed by Ziploc bags. It's very sad. Like especially the off-brand ones that smell like petroleum.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you
It's
keep
delicious.
a shoebox will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's delicious.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And as far as aging, 2 years is considered minimum for ripe tea. So that's the amount of time that it takes for the enzymes to settle and where you're getting your health benefits to start, and then the flavors will mellow. That's the dark variety. I think that's probably what you have. Is it, or it's
Yeah.
or it's very well aged.
I think it's probably, it's definitely not that really expensive stuff, but it just keeps getting better.
That's
And it's in a
what you
dark
want.
covered, in a wrapper. And
I think that sounds great. So I think yeah.
I have a lovely tea canister with a tight fitting lid.
Yeah.
From my uncle, and it holds perfectly 1 pound of loose leaf tea.
Great.
Now I'm thinking that that's not the best place to store
It can be. So a friend of mine swears by pewter containers or even tin. Now what that'll do is generally it keeps the tea from aging. It'll really slow down. So if you want the tea to stay much like it is, then that's a great way to store it. It can be a very, very fine way. I know Daniel in Vancouver and the Chinese tea shop talks a lot about that. He's got some very, very interesting old teas that have always been kept like that. There are some major collectors that swear by pewter containers. I think it's fine. If you want it to continue to age, if your goal is to take a 2018 raw pour brick and turn it into something which is going to be well aged, if you got a long enough timeline, then you want it to have airflow. You want it to have the right conditions. But if you're happy with the way it is, airtight will keep it in good condition. One advantage, 2 other types of tea I just want to make note of. White tea can be sealed for aging, so it requires no special considerations. You can age it anywhere. You could age it on in Antarctica or in the desert if you wanted to, in theory. Or Haita, like a dark tea, I guess is what they call it. Those are also, you just basically seal it and leave it. So as long as the last thing to keep in mind, and we have to get going here, but if you start with a good quality tea, then you have a chance of ending up with a very good quality aged tea. But if you're starting with a less desirable new tea, it will never really become anything good. So, but yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for listening. And I will be outside, able to answer further questions, but I think I ran a little bit long. Thank you.
Right on time. Excellent. Thank you. Big hand for Eric again.